Oh, all right, hey everyone. This is Ash. Welcome back to the King's Speech. So I just finished recording my Spy Family and Kaiju videos. Those will be out on the channel tomorrow, which will be September the 14th. Because it's late here. It's finally the time I had the energy to get around to these videos. Because the fall season has brought Sad back in a major way and has been kicking my ass. So it's been kind of hard to find the time and energy to record these videos. So I'm doing them when I can, how I can. So yeah, if the next little while the content is sporadic, now you know why. With that said, hopefully I'll catch up on some of my backlog this week. So look forward to that. Without further ado, let us dive into One Piece chapter 1059. This time I wrote up a proper script and everything for it because there's quite a few things I want to talk about. Hopefully it won't take too long, but yeah, definitely want to have some stuff I want to talk about and get my ideas out on. So without further ado, let's get into it. Chapter 1059, The Matter Involving Captain Koby, by Ichiro Oda, translation Stephen Paul, lettering by Vanessa Sato. So we get more of the Germa 66 cover story with Katakuri and Oven apparently punching each other's lights out because of Caesar's hallucination gas. I continue not to give a shit really about, the continuing Germa redemption cover story bullshit, whatever's going on. But I did find it amusing that he did manage to get Katakuri and Oven to punch each other in the face. But yeah, apart from that, I honestly don't care where these guys are going to end up. But I forgot to mention, but like always, I'll go through the chapter kind of page by page and then go through my thoughts about everything, like always. So we get a little, I don't guess not a flashback. So we're following along with more of the crew from Wano departing, kind of closing out the storylines there. So we see that Marco apparently caught a ride with Shanks and Co. back to Whitebeard's hometown of Sphinx. And Shanks is still apparently trying to poach him to join his crew, and Marco still says, "Fuck you, I got better things to do than babysit." And he goes back to being a retiree doctor. So yeah, Marco's thing kind of comes full circle, but again, I'm mixed on the whole Marco being even involved in Wano because I still am not sure what the point was for having there apart from playing interference and kind of having King and Queen be preoccupied for a little bit, because those of you that knew me from way back when I was doing theories and stuff way back before Wano started, I was throwing in a bunch of theories about how Weevil would be connected to it with Whitebeard's past and everything, and how that would involve Marco and all of that. And we get a neat little bow tie put on kind of Whitebeard's arc and get some closure on it. And so part of me feels like Oda initially did have plans along that kind of route, of introducing Weevil into Wano, bringing him in, getting him involved with the conflict, having him be involved with the conflict. Sorry, my brain's kind of just slow today. Yeah, but having him be involved, closing that arc up, having him either end up being an ally or get taken out. But it feels like, partway along, he got sidetracked and he changed his mind because he saw that, the plans he had, the ambitions he had for Wano were kind of getting too unwieldy, and he didn't want to introduce kind of another cog into it to kind of disrupt everything. And so it feels like he shifted things around to better suit and kind of punted other things off to decide to deal with it later. But we'll get to more discussion, speculation regarding Weevil and stuff after we cover some of the other events in the chapter, because he's not really that important. And I feel like since we're now getting getting status updates on what everyone else has been up to, what's been happening in the world while they were on Wano, I feel like we'll either next chapter or the chapter after we'll probably get some kind of update on Weevil. So I might save the discussion for then. But yeah, we get all the Marco stuff, which is whatever. Then we get yet another Yamato flashback. I think it's the third one in Like I think each of the previous three chapters has had like a Yamato flashback of some point, and this one has me convinced that Oda must have been getting a lot of blowback and criticism regarding his handling of Yamato's whole character arc, and like his whole like I'm gonna join the crew, I'm gonna join the crew. Nah, I decided I'm actually not gonna join the crew, and he's trying to like do damage control now, to try to kind of like ward that off, try to justify why Yamato's staying. And the reasoning he kind of came up with was, oh, now that Kaido's gone, the people know he's defeated. Someone needs to stay here for Luffy's peace of mind because he's not gonna be able to, travel the seas, travel the seas, and have fun adventuring if he's worried about Momonosuke and the others, not being able to defend the place and take care of it and all that. So with that, there's like this three specific things I want to talk about with regards to that. One is the justification we've been spoon-fed up to this point by Oda for why the Marines haven't interfered with Wano has always been implied to be that, the samurai were an unknown military force. Even like all the stuff that Brook told us about Wano when we initially got the introduction with Zoro asking him, like, what he knew about it, was always talking about, how the samurai are so powerful, like they have the strength of 1,000 men, no one could take them on. That's why no one's ever tried to take over Wano, is because they can't deal, with the samurai's power, etc., etc. And given that the Marines knew that Kaido had made Wano his home base, I feel like if he was supposed to be the deterrent that was keeping everyone away, that was kind of protecting Wano, even though, he was doing like his totalitarian authoritarian rule and doing all that bullshit, was like, still bad for them, whatever. It feels like, alright, if Kaido was the reason that they weren't attacking Wano, like, why didn't they just say, like, oh, we can't attack Wano as long as Kaido's there? And why were they continually saying, like, oh no, we can't attack Wano because there's an unknown military force, and Kizaru being like, oh yeah, I mean the samurai, blah blah blah. Like, why talk all that talk if the samurai are gonna be a non-entity with regards to, the justification of like, oh, are they gonna be able to protect Wano or not? Like, what was the point of that? And that leads kind of into my point B of this, which is, what's the point of Luffy being declared an emperor, and giving out his flag and giving these grand speeches about, oh, if you want to mess with my friends, you're going to have to come through me. Don't mess with my island. It's under my protection now. Blah, blah, blah. Like, what's the point of Wano flying a big straw hat flag or Fishman Island flying a big straw hat flag if people are going to start shit and is not going to actually provide or be any kind of deterrent for anyone looking to take over the place? Like there's, the math is not mathing, as someone would say, which leads me to point C, which kind of ties into like something that would make point A a little bit better, is that some of Oda's excuses are like justifications for like, characters, motivations, whatever, changing, would maybe land better if he hadn't dropped the whole weapons plot line so abruptly. Like, we had the whole thing set up with, way back in Dressrosa with, oh, these weapons are made of a special metal called drunken iron ore. There's only a few territories that make it. The revolutionaries being like, there's only a few places that can make and produce this kind of ore. If we find out what it is, we can find out where these weapons are being produced from. We can shut it off at the source. I have to go back and double confirm this, but Blackbeard when he invaded Baltigo and took over the revolutionaries' base, he would have found some of those weapons. And it feels like, especially given like, his whole going out trying to claim Devil Fruits and everything, it feels like, he would want to get his hands on some weapons to be able to arm his crews so he could take on more territory and stuff like that. Or even if Oda decided like, I dropped the plot line, whatever, I had to come up with something else, he could have at least mentioned the Pluton and tied that into it and be like, oh, Yamato saying like, oh, now we know the secret of Wano, that the secret of Wano, the reason that the borders have been closed all this time, the reason that Oden wanted to open it all has something to do with Pluton. It's an ancient weapon. A lot of people are going to be gunning for it. If they take over this land, if they find out it exists, it's going to put the people here in a lot of danger, and I have to protect that secret, because it's important enough for Wano to keep it locked away for all these years. There has to be a reason for it, and maybe if I stay here and go through Oden's stuff, like, I'll find out, why he was so obsessed with opening the borders. Did it have anything to do with the weapon? Like, tie that back into something. Like, give Yamato's character arc a little bit of development or motivation or something. Like, give it a direction apart from, I'm going to be the guard dog for the Wano country. Or, he could have even, like, pulled, if you wanted to, like, really scrape the bottom of the barrel for, like, justifications, excuses, he could have been like, oh, hey, you know what, Wano's a natural fortress because he's got these erratic weather patterns, these nigh unscalable cliffs, this giant waterfall that's really hard to circumvent. And so a lot of pirates like to make it their base because, it'd be kind of an impregnable fortress, and they could make it their headquarters, and kind of, it'd be a good kind of strong base territory for it. And the fact that, I can pull out so many better justifications for why Yamato would decide to stay back, and like why his motivations would suddenly change without even having to think too deeply about it. And the fact that Oda couldn't even do that much is a little bit insulting, that the best he could do was, kind of rushedly, is rushedly a word? Rushedly introduce Green Bull in just to be like, oh, here's the new admiral, and being like, oh, here he is, here's the threat. Oh, yeah, Yamato suddenly changed his mind. Oh, look, his motivations changed. Oh, there's the justification. Oh, look at me, I'm so genius. Oh, I'm so smart. And this just reminds me how half-baked a lot of like the plot lines and themes and things Oda introduced in Wano were, like how he just abandoned so many of them halfway through. Like, once he got bored, he's like, oh, this toy's lost his luster, like just tosses it off to the side. And one of the things that annoys me the most about that is we still don't know why Kaido made Wano his base of operations. And I know there's a bunch of stands dick riding Oda being like, we'll find out about it when we find out about rocks, baby. Yeah, we gotta trust in Goda. Yeah. Like, do you all hear yourselves? Like, do you hear yourselves when you're justifying this freaking mediocrity? But, not the other one plotline for, sorry, I forgot to mention, like, the Land of Gold plotline also didn't go anywhere. Like, again, that was, like, the perfect setup for it. When he mentioned in Reverie, when that Reverie, the kings and queens are mentioning, like, hey, we just did this world conscription. Armies don't run on thin air. We need funding for it. And you have the whole with the Yakimaru being like, oh, people long ago used to covet wanting Wano because it was the land of gold. And none of that actually kind of circled back around and actually came to mean anything. And I know I rant about this a lot, and I've ranted about this a lot. But it annoys me that Oda spent a chunk of time telling us, oh, Wano's super important. Like, oh my god, you guys don't even know how important this arc is going to be to the world, how important this island is. But it doesn't feel like there's under kind of supposed threat from outside forces, apart from like the Marines with Green Bull showing up. It doesn't feel like anyone is really as covetous of Wano as Oda claims they are, if that makes sense. So, like, again, it just feels like, this is just a prime example of, like, how underwhelming and underwritten Wano was as a whole. But yeah, just I had to get that a little bit out of the way, because it's just, like, at this point, it really is Oda rubbing salt in the wounds of everyone that wanted Yamato to join. Like, it is just him doing this. I don't know if I mentioned it on here. I did point this out on Twitter, and I stand by this. I stand by my remark that Oda is not writing for an audience. He is writing for marks, and this chapter just continually provides more evidence in support of that theory. Let's move on to the other stuff before I get too hung up on that. We get, again, the flashback. Marco says goodbye to Luffy, which, again, it's kind of like your mileage is going to vary, because it's been, 10 plus years since Marineford. So I feel like, any kind of camaraderie that exists between Marco and Luffy that I even bought into back then, or, any kind of closeness, there's not enough of that now. Like, there's not enough nostalgia or feelings surrounding it for me need to see any kind of closure about it, especially, reminiscing about Ace, because again, I can't remember Marco really having had too much like interaction with Ace apart from like when he was initially on the ship. So it's kind of like when you drag the story out for this long, like a lot of the emotional heft is going to be lost along the way. Uh I really hope this is the last we have to hear and see about Wano, because I'm so goddamn tired of this arc. Please just let's move on to something else. With all that done and out of the way, we finally get to the meat of this chapter, with an update on Hancock, who's apparently sustained some injuries as she's getting all moon-eyed about Luffy again. Yeah, so we'll talk about that. First, I just want to say I'm glad that Oda did not go the route I think a lot of people were kind of expecting or hesitant about, which was Hancock getting captured by the Marines, being the only warlord that was captured, potentially being sent back to Marijo, because I know a lot of fans were theorizing or speculating or hoping that Hancock would be captured and sent to Marijo, and like once her slave past was found out, because that would give Luffy a justification for having to go to Marijo and like kickstart a whole thing there. I never really liked the idea or bought into it. I always felt like, it was a little bit too out to left field, especially as like a justification for them not needing to go to Marijo. Like, it didn't make sense, because I think was Araki wrote the manga, how to write manga book, and in that I think he said like one of the big like notes he had, and like the character should always be like moving forward and they should never be going back. And I know a lot of people pointed that out with regards to One Piece, saying, that would be the equivalent of like, yeah, the strides always have to go forward in the Grand Line. They shouldn't be heading like backwards. And going to Marijo would be considered, going backwards in the story. So for several reasons, just never felt like them going to Marijo would ever be a thing that actually did happen. So I'm glad none of the Hancock stuff actually came to pass as fans were speculating. So we find out, she's reminiscing about what happened that weeks earlier. We find out that the Marines that are attacking the Kuja Island have bought some of the science group's new weapons, which are new models of the pacifista called the Seraphim. I'm going to be upfront and say that the most intriguing thing about this to me personally is the name that he's given to them, Seraphim, and that is specifically because that is yet another reference to Christian iconography in the series, where I had to look this up just to make sure I was correct, but the Seraphim apparently represent one of the highest level of angels. My brief look into it said that specifically they are the angels that are the caretakers of God's throne, and the root word for their name comes from a Hebrew one, meaning burning. So I guess that's why Oda gave them the whole like Lunarian genes and design and thing, and like that's why he gave them the name, because the whole Lunarians burning flame stuff. So that was interesting. But yeah, the reason it's interesting to me specifically is again that those of you that know me from years ago in the fandom know that I have several prominent theories about how Christian like iconography and theology and stuff ties into potential One Piece stuff, and I've used that to kind of like speculate on future plot points and things. And I wrote like one huge editorial back on it in the day, which has sadly been taken down. So I'll see if I can find another way to post it somewhere if anyone's interested in giving that a gander. But yeah, I think the most prominent one I had with regards to that specifically is speculation that anyone carrying the initial D is basically a Nephilim, which is like supposed to be half angel, half human hybrid. So we'll talk about that a little bit later with regards to the Lunarian stuff. But yeah, that's the only thing that really kind of caught my eye with regards to that. With regards to the Seraphim themselves, I'm basically mixed on what we got or are getting. Like basing them on the warlords, I guess makes sense. They're supposed to be the replacements, new models, and it keeps with the theme of they had the Kuma clones. Of course, next generation they decide to model each one after one of the warlords. I was like, that did make me wonder though, why Oda made them children rather than the full grown like model clones that I assume they're going to grow into. So yeah, first guess would be that they're going to grow up into, the full versions at some point. But that makes me kind of question, like, all right, if they are going to grow into full, like, if they are going to grow, learn, whatever, does that mean that they're just modified humans and not like actual cyborgs, like Kuma? Because I feel like that would not be the route they would want to go with, especially after Kuma basically did kind of screw them over at Sabaudi with his own, kind of goals and with his own goals and like his own agenda when he's helped all the Straw Hats escape. So it feels like they wouldn't want to make that same mistake again by making modified humans that would potentially be that could potentially turn on them at some point and would make them harder to control. But I guess like the counterbalance to that would be, well, since they are children, I guess it allows the possibility that it's easier to make them like brainwash them, indoctrinate them, and like kind of brainwash them into marine propaganda while they grow up into their full adult forms. But again, I don't know like why you wouldn't just make them adult robots unless Oda's going to come up with some kind of justification for why they need to grow up to like become full power or something. But it is whatever. Like, just no, I'm not gonna think. No, I'm not gonna think too deeply about that. What else? I will say, but after rereading the chapter, one thought I did have with regards to that was I think Marguerite, the blonde that they met on Amazon Lily first. Yeah, she goes like, "Who is that? I can't find a little girl her size." So maybe that might be why they decided to go with designing them as kids, is to kind of get people caught off guard by seeing like, hey, they see a kid and immediately like their defenses go down and they think like, oh, it's not a big threat. Boom, they pull out their pull power and get taken down easily. Thinking of like someone like Sugar in Dressrosa being an example of this, because she was a little kid, like it was very easy to put your guard down around her, which is why it was so easy for her to like turn people into toys because they didn't really suspect that she'd be evil or mastermind. So I'm guessing, yeah, it's probably might have been part of it. Another reason might be, also makes it easier for them to infiltrate bases and get people to put their guard down because kids are not really super suspicious and people don't really expect them to be like spies or expect them to be malicious. But yeah, apart from that, it'll be interesting to see which other warlords we see getting little mini me's made of them. But yeah, that's about it. But I think the big question with regards to this, though, is why didn't they take some of the Seraphim with them to capture some of the other warlords as well? Like we saw Mini Hawk in this chapter, and to me it makes sense. Like if you want to test out your new weapon, why wouldn't you test it out against the original model? The thing you based it on, like the real life thing you based it on. Like, why wouldn't you test it against that to see, like, where the gaps are, how much more further they have to go before, they're able to match their real life counterparts, what kind of damage output and stuff are they capable of, etc., etc. And, like, especially with Mihawk, it feels like, why wouldn't you send some of your new weapons, especially given that we see in this chapter that they are pretty damn powerful, like even powerful enough to give Blackbeard pause and give him enough trouble to make him scared enough to be like, hey, I'm going to use my black hole to get you creepy little fucks away from me. Well, it doesn't make sense they wouldn't have sent some of them after the world's strongest swordsman to kind of help take him down. But again, this feels like Oda just, kind of withholding the reveal for the sake of surprise and not fully thinking through like all the implications the way I am. But I guess they could, his justification could be like there might be a setback or kink in them, or that they're not powerful enough yet to be able to take out Mihawk, and that's why they sent out them to take out Bo, because they consider weaker than he is. But yeah, so we'll see what happens with regards to that. And I think the final question I have with regards to Seraphim is, are they eventually gonna possess the power of their counterparts? Like, is Boa's, Mini-Me gonna have her petrification power? Is Mihawk's gonna, well, I guess Mihawk is just fucking swinging a sword around, but if they made a Buggy clone, is he gonna have Buggy's power to be able to, like, split himself apart? Like, is Vegapunk able to copy those Devil Fruit powers onto the clones, is, I guess, the question. But yeah. So with all that said, here is my quick little kind of disclaimer. I know a lot of people are going to use this to discredit my criticisms. Whatever, that's on you. But here's the thing. So I had theorized a couple of years ago that the new Pacifistas would potentially be based on the Sentinels from X-Men. And a quick rundown for those of you that don't remember what they are, don't know what I'm talking about. I want to disclaim this by saying I'm talking specifically about the ones from the X-Men movie, Days of Future Past. So if anyone wants to come at me with in the comics they were like this, I have no idea what they were like in the comics. I know there's a bunch of different versions. I'm not thinking or talking about any of those ones. I'm basing mine purely on what we saw in that movie. So don't come at me with any actuallys. They're basically robots that used Mystique, the shape-shifting, blue-skinned mutants' powers to basically be able to shapeshift and adapt into, whatever, basically shapeshift, copy, adapt to whatever mutant power they're being attacked with, so that they could basically counter any mutant that they came across. So for an example, if they came across someone that had a fire power, they could turn themselves into ice. If they had someone that could, throw swords at you, they could turn themselves into diamond to counter that. But, that's kind of the idea I was going with Pacifistas. Because to me, that made perfect sense that, given the variety and nature of Devil Fruits, like, the unpredictable nature of what they can do, like what their abilities are, how creatively they can be used, you would think the ultimate counter to that would be something that could adapt to literally any kind of power being tossed their way, right? And like be able to adapt and like counter right away with like the perfect counter. Like we know that, like the fire and smoke Logias cancel each other out, or that Wax was the counter enemy to Magellan's poison power. Like imagine that in robot form. I feel like that would be kind of the ultimate weapon for the Marines, because again, like what most pirates would not be able to stand up to something like that, especially if you gave it the durability of a pacifista, which means only someone with with really good hockey would be able to counter something like that. And for me, like what made it make even more sense was the fact that we had the existence of Wapol metal, which we know is kind of like basically a shape memory alloy from what we've seen of it. So I imagine it being something like akin to like the T2 liquid metal Terminator from Terminator 2. You could make this pacifistas out of this new metal, have them shapeshift and adapt to like these different forms. Because I think General Frankie's also made of the same stuff. So it feels like all the building blocks, were there set up to get to what I kind of theorized. And the thing that disappointed me is like, now this isn't me saying that, like, oh, I'm just mad because my theory didn't come true and that's why I'm saying the Seraphim are shit, blah, blah, blah. That's not what I'm saying. It's just that I dislike the fact that the reveal, that the Seraphim are basically half Lunarian, quarter Lunarian, whatever percentage Lunarian they are, is based on a reveal of something we got 3/4 of the way into Wano. And I'm not a fan of like the whole Lunarian idea and the way that Oda introduced it, and kind of like the wibbly wobbly, timey-wimey, like hand-wavy explanation for like, oh, as long as they like, I don't like the explanation being that, they're basically Charizard, as long as the flame is going, they're invincible. Once the flame goes out, they're gonna die. Like, it just feels like, a slim justification for like introducing this new race and be like, oh look, there's suddenly this hidden race we knew nothing about and it's super integral to the story. Like, ooh, like 1,000 chapters in, I feel like, it's justified of being a little bit annoyed that he's dropping apparently like just major lore drops that are going to apparently have like wide-reaching implications. And it's the same way I feel about the emu reveal. Like, I still don't feel like the emu reveal was set up well or foreshadowed well. And as much as I criticized the fandom for misusing the term foreshadowing, like how much importance they give and place on it, one of the good things Oda has usually been good about is, dropping subtle hints and clues to major reveals that he reveals, a couple hundred chapters later, that he seeds throughout the story. Because when you eventually do get to that reveal and, you realize what the clues were, you realize how interconnected and thoughtfully planned out it was, like how he laid like, a little trail of breadcrumbs to lead you to that. The whole like Nika and Emu reveal and the Lunarians feel like the antithesis of all that, like where he just kind of dropped it in on you. He was like, hey, here's a thing that now exists, like, oh, out of nowhere, like, oh yeah, this suddenly was this folk hero you've never heard anything about that's suddenly, super important to the lore of this story. Oh, here's the Lunarians, they're also super important to the lore of this story. Oh, they have like, ties to the Grand Line, this and that. And the thing is, like, now maybe Oda will eventually flesh out the Lunarian collection, the connection between the Lunarians and the angel races, all that. But so far, it feels extremely hand-handed, like he's just shoving it in to be like, oh, look at that, are you surprised? Are you surprised? Oh, look at how clever I am. Oh, you didn't expect that, did you? Oh, look at that. And I think the reason it doesn't help is that they're relatively new developments within a series, like, by relatively new, I mean, like within the last 100 chapters or so, in a series that's run 1,000+ chapters, and they're given more importance and weight than ideas he's introduced literal decades ago that he's kind of just put on the back burner, and now it's kind of like, the pot's kind of burned and like the food is just kind of carbonized in it, the way he's handled it. Now, maybe I'm being unfair, because I can't say with 100% certainty whether Oda's planned these developments since the beginning, and he's literally just been waiting for the opportune moment to, drop it in, etc., etc. But it definitely feels shoehorned in my opinion. And, given that he's outright admitted that, he's blended, merged ideas for arcs, and that he has serious FOMO with regards to the series, not being able to fit in like the millions and millions of like ideas and creative impulses just kind of ratchet through his brain, I can't put it past him that the Lunarians and such ideas he came up with and got attached to and decided he had to incorporate because of the aforementioned FOMO. I feel like it's the same with hockey, where like he introduced hockey. It was a basic idea, had an idea of what he wanted to do with it, introduced it, and then as time goes on, as he's needed to retroactively fit in, plot conveniences and things, he's kind of changed around the limitations of what hockey is, what it's capable of, like all the different levels of it, and kind of just put that into there and pretend like, it's always been his kind of plan to incorporate that. But it just does not feel well thought out. But again, I don't want to dwell too much on that. I just want to get my thoughts out with regards to that. Time will tell, whether Oda's gambles have paid off or not. Let's get to the rest of the chapter since we finished talking about that. And then, so the Seraphim Reveal also got the answer to one of the other big mysteries that was set up during one of the Wano acts. And that's the reveal that the person, fruit, power, whatever Blackbird is talking about, where he's saying if the world government doesn't want to grab it, I'll go take it, blah, 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 is apparently Boa Hancock's. And this was baffling to me, and not really in a good way, because to me it kind of reeks of Oda's, oh, I don't want people to predict my story. I want to be unpredictable. I want to be surprising. Because as far as we know, Boa's powers lets her turn people affected by her beauty, basically start lusting after her. It allows her to turn them into stone. I assume it operates on the same level of I assume it operates the same way that Big Mom's fruit does, Soul Fruit does, in that any powerful emotion could potentially trigger her ability with Big Mom was basically using fear, intimidation, and as long as their soul was it Jinbei said something. I can't remember most of Whole Cake, but Jinbei basically said in Whole Cake, if you let Big Mom frighten and intimidate you, if your soul gets out of order, bent out of shape, that's what allows her to trigger her ability to actually grab your soul. But if you're not intimidated or affected by it, if your soul remains, solid, stoic, whatever, then she doesn't have the ability to manipulate you. So I assume it's the same with Boa. As long as she gets that reaction out of you, she's able to use that to, to her advantage. And I assume, and I think the assumption is that it's not limited to just beauty, and Boa just uses that as the way of, and Boa uses that as a way to activate her powers because for her it's the easiest. And I say that because there's been so many memes and jokes about, how, oh, what the fuck's Blackbeard gonna do with his ugly face, trying to make people get lust after him, blah blah blah, all kind of stupid jokes about that. But yeah, it's just my 2 cents. Is I assume that it doesn't operate on beauty alone. The only other, I think, kind of semi-side theory I had potentially was we might get the reveal that maybe Blackbeard isn't the only one that could potentially eat more than one fruit. Maybe all of his crew, through some unknown mechanism, whatever, could potentially eat more than one. Which made me wonder if Katarina Devon was going to be the one that actually wanted Hancock's fruit. Because, given the fact that she can transform into different people, I assume, she could probably make use of that the same way Hancock does. But I didn't get that vibe from the chapter, but I just wanted to put that out there. But yeah. Now, back to Hancock's fruit. So now, unless there's something about her fruit's awakening we don't know about it, Oda's deciding, throw a curveball in, it's oh, you thought, unless Oda's gonna be oh, it's like the rubber fruit, it turns out Hancock's fruit is actually something completely different and she just hasn't unlocked the full potential of it, whatever. The only fan theory I kind of like and can buy into for the reason justification for why he wants her power is he wants to unpetrify someone from the past that's been frozen by a previous user of the fruit. So yeah, that's the only reason I can think of is turning people to stone. Sure, it's a useful ability, but given the requirements to be able to set it off, I feel it's such a niche one that very few people would be able to effectively use. And given Blackbeard's whole thing of I want powerful devil fruits, I feel he'd want one that don't have a steep learning curve or obscure requirements to be able to use it. And here's the thing, there's been people justifying Hancock says in this chapter to try to bluff I think she basically was trying to bluff Blackbeard by saying oh, if you kill me then we won't be able to undo him with a petrification on your people because a subsequent user can't undo the curse done by a previous user. But how would she know that unless she knew the previous owner of the fruit, or unless she read Vegapunk's science book on devil fruits, or someone told her? How would she know that petrification done by one person can't be undone by the next user of the fruit? And B, like I said, she has no incentive to be truthful to Blackbeard when he's threatening to kill her, just take the power and undo the petrifications. Of course she's not gonna say yeah, go ahead bro, that totally will work. Of course she's gonna try to get him to keep her alive, rather than trying to kill her. But yeah, I don't, this is a reveal where I'm I don't really know if I'm excited to find out what this is. This doesn't feel like it's gonna end up being clever or not, but again, we'll talk about that stuff at the end. And then this is kind of where the chapter gets a little bit frustrating for me. And that's with the Raleigh Ex Machina, which again, I've complained about this in Wano before, but it feels like Oda's definitely bringing back, One Piece's greatest hits in a semi-new, like with the new coat of paint, trying to pretend like he's not doing the same thing again. But we get Raleigh showing up as an ex machina, telling Blackbeard to basically fuck off, and that he never liked him. I'll say I did like that line of Raleigh saying, I never fucked with you, Blackbeard. I didn't like you." That was amusing. But he basically shows up to rescue Hancock, stop her from being a damsel in distress. Makes Blackbeard retreat, when he takes Koby as his consolation prize. And the conflict kind of ends there. And the thing is, like, with Oda continually having claimed that, Wano is going to represent a turning tipping point. Oh, it's going to make the Marineford War look like nothing. Oh, I'm planning to end the series within 3 years, etc., etc. I expect bigger and greater developments than what we got in this chapter. Like, don't get me wrong, like, yes, we did get some big reveals, the last 2 chapters, stuff like the creation of Crocodile, the reveal of Crosskill, Crocodile's new machinations and plans, the reveal of what, Blackbeard was actually going after, what his goals and plans are, the new pacifista morals, etc. And I know this comes off as me being, like, overly critical, ungrateful, hater, whatever. But let's not pretend that these chapters haven't been showboating and kind of just building artificial hype. Like, it's the equivalent to me of, like, dipping your toe into the water, to check if the temperature's fine, like if it's warm enough for you to dive in. Instead of just saying fuck it and diving in with a cannonball, screw what the water temperature's like. Because we're supposed to be in the end game of the series at this point. Like, we're supposed to be heading towards, like, the big climax. But instead of giving us answers, like, Oda's just raising more and more and more questions and just kicking the proverbial can, like, down the road and kicking it and doing, like, a lot of saber rattling, being like, oh, the war's about to start. It's like, oh, we're getting ready. Like, oh, we're about to fight. Yeah, oh, the conflict's gonna be really bloody. Like, oh, like, all of this would be fine. Like, it wouldn't sting so badly if we hadn't been strung along for so long with these false promises of, like, these great conflicts and all these great developments, etc., etc. Because there is a lot of plot for Oda to wrap up and wrap up satisfactorily, and he's not doing anyone any favors, especially himself, by playing the cards so close to his chest, this close to the end game. Because the more he heightens the fan expectations at this point, for what's going to happen, what the final conflict is going to be like, all the mysteries he's built up, all the answers to those mysteries, the greater the fan expectations will be for him to deliver on those. And while some people, like I said with the dick riding, will swallow whatever he throws towards them, I think a lot more people are going to be disappointed. More people are going to be disappointed than they expect, I think, when he actually fails to deliver. And I think that's what the market difference in reactions to this chapter will be. Like, those that trust Oda to deliver and those that don't. And after Wano, like, I'm firmly in the camp of I don't trust in him to deliver. Because Wano was the perfect example of this. Because the thing is, like, the first act got me really, really excited for all the potential plot points and themes and things he's introducing. How he could incorporate it, how he could use it to develop the Straw Hats, who so badly needed development after being sidelined and forgotten for so long. And he failed to deliver on almost every single element. And so knowing that, it's like, all right, what exactly is going to be different with regards to, like, all the stuff he's setting up in this chapter? It's like you're the rat in the maze, and, the rat, like, the little lab test where they're like, they teach you that like if you go for the food, you know, you're gonna get a scoop. If you press the button, you get a snack. And then they've decided that they're gonna put a shock under the button. So you press the button and you get a shock. And every 5 shocks, you get a Scooby snack. Then after that, they changed to every 10 shocks to get a Scooby snack. So how many times do you keep like they keep increasing the amount of times you have to press that button to get that Scooby snack, but each time you're still gonna get shocked. So how many times does Oda keep expecting me to get the shock for a Scooby snack that's been made with cheaper and cheaper ingredients? Like, I'd love to be proven wrong about a lot of this. Like, I'd like to believe that, you know, now that Oda's done with Wano, he's learned from his mistakes. He knows what he did wrong. He knows what he has to do to fix it. And he's going to rectify that all now with, you know, the final arc stuff. But, again, like, I can't just take it on blind faith anymore that that's a thing that's going to happen. So, like, we'll have to wait and see what happens with that. But I'm honestly not holding my breath. Sorry, I forgot one more thing I wanted to mention with regards to the Lunarian stuff. Why I don't like that, and that's the angel races thing. So we've had years and years and years of speculation with regards to, you know, what does the D mean? What, you know, is Luffy potentially half wing, like potentially Skypiea, Bilkin, whatever, like one of the half moon, one of the winged races from the moon. Like, what's their whole deal? And this was kickstarted by like one of the volume 20 covers, where Luffy's kind of like winking at the camera. He's got like the Skypiea wings growing behind him, and it led to so much speculation about like, oh, you know, are all the D's just like descendants of the Sky People, etc., all that. And with the Lunarian reveal, it feels like Oda's partially kind of retconning that, being like, oh, no, like the Sky Angel races weren't the important ones. It's the Lunarians. They're the important ones. And it feels like, you know, people are trying to retcon this to fit in with some other, what I would claim were aesthetic elements that Oda's introduced in the series, like Luffy's Flame Hawk or, you know, Shit G's whole Diable Jamba. Now people are trying to be like, oh, well, like, oh, Oda had this plan from the beginning. Like, Luffy's fire ability is obviously because he has Lunarian DNA. Same with Sanji. Like, oh, Judge experimented on him and he has Lunarian DNA. Like, I feel like this is just a convenient thing Oda can retcon the Lunarian thing onto and not something he actively planned for and or foreshadowed. Like, I still feel like, you know, the Luffy's Flamehawk being based on being a tribute to Ace. That's why the flame effects were there. I don't think there was really any deeper meaning or foreshadowing to that. And again, the same with the freaking Diablo Jamba. I still think Oda introduced it with the idea like, oh, you know, his heart burned so hot with passion that he literally set himself on fire. And I think it was just a convenient retcon that he could attach the Lunarian thing to. I don't think it was something he actually foreshadowed or thought out beforehand. And like, if we eventually do get the reveal, like, oh, you know, the Lunarians are either, you know, like, you know, the Skypians, Bilks and everything, like, descended from the Lunarians, or, you know, they're a different race, whatever. Again, it'll feel like a retcon. It'll feel like Oda changed his mind. It's kind of like retroactive, like trying to stuff the plot into this new mold that he's built. But yeah, that's what I wanted to say. Like, that's why it felt like so off to me, like, because we already have something to do with the angel races. So introducing a completely new one 3/4 of the way into the arc just didn't sit right with me. But yeah, so I'll try to end that with some positive stuff about the chapter, because it wasn't completely terrible, like, despite my, you know, very, very long review about it. But it was minor stuff I liked. So I did like the confirmation that Shaki was apparently the former Kuja Empress, because that totally tracks with her character, and that is an actual reveal that actually works within the spirit of the series. Like, that's something where as soon as you heard it, it just made sense, like it clicked. So I really like that reveal. I know Alvida fans are happy because, you know, potential Alvida Koby reunion with Cross Guild, so it'll be interesting seeing if that happens. It was fun seeing Blackbeard again, even if I don't think he built up the sense of dread or made it feel as unsettling as he normally did with his prior introductions. And I feel like that's solely because he got scared off so easily by both Raleigh and the Seraphim, and because of the kind of Han reveal of he's going after Hancock's fruit. I think those both kind of working in tandem just undercut any supposed tension we're supposed to feel that Blackbeard's been on the move again. Especially, I think also especially the fact that his crew got taken out so easily by Hancock. Like, yeah, I guess I get there's a delicate balance to kind of find. Like, you don't want to make him look too powerful and Hancock look too weak, vice versa. But I don't feel like Oda really nailed that balance well. And like I said, with the saber rattling, he wasn't really able to commit too deeply or build up Blackbeard as the credible threat he needed to be. So I think that kind of also undercut a little bit of the tension. But yeah, that's what it was. Hopefully, next couple of chapters will have some more actual intriguing developments. We'll see. Like I mentioned at the start, we assume next chapter we'll see Weevil, what he's been up to. So I'll save discussion regarding him and the whole Whitebeard plotline and stuff for the next review. But with that said, I will end it there because this went very, very long. I think a little bit longer than expected. What I hope was a little bit insightful, at least gave you a little insight into my process, my criticisms. As always, if you like my content, please do like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff, especially if you disagree with anything I said, or if you agree with any of my criticisms. I'd also love to know. I'd also really love to get to 169 subscribers, because magic funny number would make me really happy. Like I said, expect the videos out later. And until next time, this is Ash. Talk to you all later.